This May marks the 30th anniversary of the execution of serial killer John Wayne Gacy, known as the Killer Clown, one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history, murdering at least 33 teenage boys and young men in his Chicago area home and then burying them under his house. Well, now his former attorney Karen Conti reveals some untold truths in her new book, Killing Time with John Wayne Gacy, defending America's most evil serial killer on death row. Karen, good morning to you. Welcome back to the National Desk. I'm just curious, how did you get to represent John Wayne Gacy? Tell us the timeline here. What happened?
Well, the crimes were committed when I was in high school. So flash ahead 14 years, Gacy has been sentenced to death. I'm now a lawyer for just a few years. And we get the call, my partner and I, that Gacy wanted a First Amendment lawyer because he had some civil matters that he had been sued on. Well, we had no intention of representing him in those kinds of things. But I was curious, Jan. I was very curious. When you grew up in Chicago, John Wayne Gacy's the boogeyman. He's a household word. And I wanted to go down to death row, a place I had never been. And I wanted to look at the epitome of evil. And we did. And after meeting him and after being on death row, we decided to take on his death penalty appeals at the very end.
And I think so many people are shocked when the serial killer is the neighbor next door or the nice man you never expected would do this. What was he like? And when you were in his presence, did you feel the evilness? Did you see it?
I would like to say that I did, but I didn't. He was your normal guy. He was like the bus driver you say hello to every morning. He was affable, he was glib, he was engaging, he was intelligent, and that's how he got away with it. I mean, here was a guy who lived a very moral life most of the time. He went to church, he raised family, he was good to his kids. You know, he volunteered in churches and in hospitals, he mowed the lawn for his neighbors, and then he would go out and do the most unspeakable things you can imagine. So he was very compartmentalized, and he was very good at being normal when you were dealing with him on a daily basis.
Gosh, it's fascinating. And I think it's because, too, so many people are into true crime these days. I mean, that's like the #1 podcast, true crime. You see it on, Netflix, Amazon. Everybody loves true crime. Why are we seeing so many more documentaries now about the mind of the serial killer? And how do they get to this place? Are there certain traits and childhood attributes that can be a big red flag? Because there are many people who might have experienced something similar to what Gacy did and possibly even worse, but did not become serial killers. So what was it, do you think, that got him to this place, or that can get someone to this place?
That's a really good question, and it's hard to say because, as you said, like, he was abused by his father. There's no question he was physically and mentally and verbally abused. But a lot of people are, and they don't turn out to be murderers. But he also was sexually abused. He had trouble with his sexual identity from a very young age. His father was relentless when it came to berating him about that. And he was also, he sustained 2 very serious head injuries, which the experts say can damage a part of your brain that deals with empathy or impulse control. So add all these things together, and you come up with a Gacy. But again, you have a lot of people in this world who have less, more traumatic things happen to them, and they don't end up killing 33 boys.
Yeah, and you have said what concerned you most was that he was not arrested sooner. Why wasn't he? And if investigators asked you where they should look for additional victims, where would you point them to?
Well, Gacy was out of town a lot during his killing spree. He was doing construction jobs, and I saw his business records, so that confirmed it. There's no question in my mind that when he was in rural Wisconsin or Pacific Northwest or Florida, that he was continuing his crime spree in those areas. And because we don't have a database from that time that was integrated, so that if he crossed the state line, nobody would have known that there were boys missing and tied them to Gacy. But if someone were to go back and look at those records and determine were there men and boys who went missing in those areas, perhaps we could tie more victims to Gacy. But again, so many years have gone by that I'm not sure that'll ever happen.
Right. And very quickly, do you think there are more serial killers now, or is it because we're just seeing more attention perhaps on true crime?
There are not. There are actually drastically fewer serial killers and fewer victims. I think we're just obsessed with it. We always have been with the Jack the Rippers of the world. We will always be obsessed with serial killers. And I think that it's really just because it's a news story and because people are just completely fascinated by the worst of the worst.
Yeah, they really are. Karen Conti, always great to talk to you.
Thank you,
Best of luck to you and your book as well. We appreciate you joining us this morning. And still ahead, barring blockades, Washington state lawmakers pushing to increase penalties for disruptive and illegal protests.